Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Reason and Theology Show. Your host, Michael, on a Tuesday. I want to do a review here of Pope Francis and his pontificate, the good and the bad, if you will. Well, we're about 10 years into this thing. He was elected 13th of March, 2013. He's 86 years old, and so I think we can kind of get a pretty good feel for his pontificate overall since we've had a decade of it. I don't know how much longer the pontificate is going to be and if it's going to significantly change from this point on. I don't really expect any massive, significantly different changes in his pontificate. I think it's going to continue to be what it has been so far. Again, he's 86 years old. He's had major surgery 2021. I don't know, again, how much longer it's going to be, but even if it's another 10 years or so, I don't expect it to be significantly different than what we've already seen. And what we've seen so far in the last decade of this pontificate, I would say, is a mixture of some good things and some bad things. Um, and in this case, what I'm actually going to do is start with maybe some of the bad things, some of the things that I think that we could, in fairness and in charity, offer as criticism. I mean, we can certainly express some of our concerns per Canon 212. Even to an extent, Donum Veritatis, a magisterial document, recognizes this. And so, it can be done. We have to be respectful to those who are in office whenever we do so. But we can express our concerns and express those publicly, again, per canon law. And that's what I want to do here. Maybe express some of those concerns and criticisms. And then also touch on some of the things that I think that are good from this pontificate, some of which, people may or may not be aware of, but hopefully it kind of shows a balanced perspective because we tend to find people who are, on the extremes here. Some people will just see this as the worst pontificate ever. Others will see it as the greatest pontificate ever. Many people probably know my story, and that is that I used to be those who thought that this was the worst pontificate ever in church history. Well, I've walked that back a little bit. I don't think that that's necessarily fair to say about this pontificate compared to others when we look at church history and evaluate some scenarios. I certainly think that we can point to some darker times in church history. That being said, I don't necessarily think that this is also the best pontificate we've ever had. I do think that there has been, a rocky ride here, especially with social media and the way that social media seems to be playing out. I kind of feel like this is the Pope and this is the pontificate where we really get to see how the papacy works with social media and social media being how active that it is. There's just so much information spread so quickly. A lot of it is misinformation. And so I think what we're kind of seeing here is what it looks like to have, a pope in a social media age. Well, there are some criticisms here. Let's maybe talk about some of those. Let's start with the bad, and then we'll go over the good. I have about 11 concerns, I should say. So about 11 things that I want to note in the bad category. And then I'll have about 11 things that I believe are positive and good about this pontificate that I will address after that. So in the first category, some things that I think we could say certainly need some area of, an improvement. Number one is bad appointments. I think we can certainly admit there have been some bad appointments for those who are chosen as cardinals in some cases. I'm not saying every appointment is bad. I'm just saying there are some instances where I'm not exactly sure why somebody was chosen to be a cardinal, or other instances in which, perhaps there were some poor choices here on who is made a bishop. So we definitely have some poor choices there. There was that appointment. I actually evaluated it here on the show and offered some criticism. But there was an appointment to the Academy for Life not long ago, Mariana Mazzucato, very controversial figure, not exactly in line with the Catholic perspective on life in some areas. And so not really a good appointment. And I kind of feel like what's going on is Pope Francis will sometimes get um, opinions from people who hold to like contrarian positions so that he can kind of get both sides of the story, a different perspective. I don't know how effective that is. And in fact, I'll be addressing that later. So I think this is bad appointment. Father James Martin, I think multiple bad appointments here. Number one, to the Synod of Bishops. Now, he's obviously not a bishop, but he's going to be one of the individuals um, that will be attending the Synod of Bishops and offering some commentary and input there. And I kind of feel like, given some of the concerns that I've expressed about him on this channel, I'm not so sure that was the best idea. Maybe check out my videos of Father James Martin here on this channel to get a better feel for why I say that. Consultor also to the Vatican Secretariat for Communications. This is another thing that he made him a consultor for this communication secretariat. And also not exactly sure that was a really good choice. And this list can go on. I mean, I've only mentioned kind of four things here, but I'm sure we can all think of other instances. So I haven't been impressed with some of the appointments. I would certainly put that in the bad category. I also think that in some instances, I kind of feel like he's uneven in discipline. Now, I don't necessarily think he offers a whole lot of discipline. That's going to be a later concern. But in some instances where he has offered discipline, I kind of feel it was a little uneven. Let me give you an example. The Missal of 62 in Traditionis Custodes, the restrictions that he offers there were they're pretty strong restrictions. So he still allows for the Missal of 62 in some instances, and even allows it for the FSSP and others. But he definitely restricted it with some pretty harsh restrictions. I'm not sure that was the best direction. I understand why he did it. He tells us why. It's to clamp down on those who are trying to weaponize this missal, however good it may be. They're trying to weaponize it to promote schism in the church. Yeah, you do have some people who do that, but I'm not sure that this was the best way to address that problem. That's my criticism of Traditionis Custodes. I kind of feel like, but did you have to go there? I kind of feel like we could have done some other things to address this issue. I felt like that was pretty severe. But my concern is not only the severity, but also it being uneven, because I kind of feel like, well, if we're going to be that severe in our discipline there, why aren't we severely disciplining really bad instances of abuse in the Novus Ordo? I just get the impression that it's uneven there. Now, if that's not the case, all right, I'm willing to stand corrected, but it's the impression that I get. And I think a lot of other people share that impression. So it would be helpful to assure us that that's inaccurate. I kind of feel like, if anything, we really need to be addressing abuses in the Novus Ordo, and then we can kind of address some of the issues with people weaponizing the Missal of 62. And in fact, I am of the opinion, I've said it for a long time, you wouldn't even have people using the Missal of 62. It would not even be as popular if you didn't already have abuses in the Novus Ordo. The vast majority of people who are attracted to the Missal of 62, called the traditional Latin Mass, the people who are who are attracted to that often are trying to flee from abuses in the Novus Ordo. So if those were addressed, you wouldn't really even have to address these other people who are fleeing to the TLM, and in some instances try to use and weaponize the TLM. So I kind of feel like we're uneven here. There's better ways to handle this. I'm not too impressed with that. Another thing is he has a policy of not responding to critics, and in some cases I don't think this has helped him at all. Now, as one who is slandered every single hour of every single day, I know personally you don't respond to every critic. That's not a good decision. You don't want to respond to every critic. I'm not suggesting that he responds to every critic, but abiding issues that are confusing, recurring criticisms that come up from prominent figures, I think that there's wisdom in addressing those and not allowing them to continue to linger. Pachamama is a perfect example, classic example. Now, Father Giuliani on this show showed that in the Vatican Garden ceremony, it wasn't even Pachamama. And Pope Francis adds to the confusion there when he calls it the Pachamama. It wasn't even Pachamama, and there was no idolatry, there was no worship of that image anyway. So Pope Francis, unfortunately, has not come out and done as much as he could to clarify that. He has a little bit in his Amazon Synod document where he mentions, all forms of idolatry should be decried, but it's kind of like we need something a little bit stronger there, and it would have been helpful to come out and explain a little bit better maybe what Father Giuliani did. I think that would have been helpful. To this date, he hasn't really responded to those critics, and I'm kind of getting the impression he doesn't even realize how severe the criticism is. Like, he doesn't realize how many people there are criticizing him on this point. That's the thing. I kind of feel like he thinks that it's just a few people. I don't think he realizes how many people see the Pachamama event as papal idolatry. You might want to address this issue. Amoris Laetitia, I think that he could have responded to some critics there as well. So, and I'm sure there's plenty of other instances that we can mention here. But the policy of not responding to critics has not served him very well, because there are some very severe criticisms that are still being brought forward to this day. And I don't think he realizes what kind of destruction those criticisms are causing to souls right now. And if he realized it, I kind of feel like he should then say something to help guide and pastor those souls who are really confused right now. And if he did that, I think it would help people. I think it would help a lot of people who are kind of on the fence. It won't convince everybody, but it will help some. Number 4, I feel like in some instances he receives very poor advice. I mean, we're talking about it right now. Do you really think, he's not on social media, are you really under the impression that he is being given advice? He's being told from his advisors how bad the situation is, feet on the ground, with how bad some people, feel about him and how bad their criticism is and some of the confusion that is going on. I feel like if he knew, he would address it. So there has to be some breakdown in communication with advisors. Moreover, I mean, clearly there's poor advisors and bad appointments. Some of these appointments are handpicked. Other appointments is clearly due to poor advisors. So I think we can certainly acknowledge that one. In other instances, Pope Francis is not as clear as he should be. And that's unfortunate. Clarity, precision, these are essential for a pontificate. Hold on 1 second, excuse me. So these are essential components to a papacy. Clarity, especially theological clarity. In some instances, I kind of feel like that's lacking. I'll give you an example, the Abu Dhabi document, one that I've addressed many times here on the show. There is one of those ambiguous phrases there where God wills the diversity of religions, race, color, languages. And I want to say that's a terrible way of phrasing things, because those are not the same categories of willing. God wills the diversity of religions only in his permissive will. God wills different races, however, more than just his permissive will. And so these don't belong in the same category. And there was a lot of people who are confused over that. Yeah, he did come back and clarify that, but he didn't clarify it, in some kind of official Vatican decree. And I feel like he should have done that. Not only clarify it to Bishop Schneider and say, yeah, you're welcome to publish that, but actually go out and clarify that through a Vatican office, like actually communicate that officially, maybe through the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith, through a clarifying document there that speaks about the distinctions in the will of God. Like that would have been helpful. Or just some kind of note on the Vatican website to make it pretty clear and official. He didn't do that. And so, not as clear as he should be. And he clearly doesn't see how many people are confused about that, how bad it is. And so, he's unfortunately allowing the situation, whether he realizes it or not, he's allowing the situation to fester more and more and more, to grow, in the hearts of people who continue to be more and more and more confused. He's allowing that situation to fester. I assume he doesn't know that. I assume he's allowing it through ignorance. But nonetheless, it's happening. And it is being allowed, even if through ignorance. So number 6, I think that he tolerates some dissenters in the church way too much. He gives them way too much room. Yes, he has clamped down on a few figures. There have been some individuals that has excommunicated. Yes, that's true. There have been some people who have been laicized. I get it. There's been some instances. Yeah, you even have strong discipline in Traditionis Custodes. Well, it's lopsided because it's only towards one group, but then it's not towards the other. But those are exceptional. I kind of feel like we need a little bit more discipline in the church. And I'm talking about on the radical progressive side and on the radical traditionalist side. We need more. Neither one of them are really being disciplined. I mean, you have voices out there completely promoting same-sex blessings. And then you have other voices out there completely advocating that Pope Francis isn't the Pope. And it's like neither group have been formally disciplined, and bishops on both sides here haven't been laicized and excommunicated. And I'm just kind of wondering why is so much tolerance given to bishops out there who are engaging in schism, and other bishops out there who are also, to one degree or another, promoting schism and heterodox views and immorality. It's like, I think we need more discipline here. That's a big one to me. Um, I'll also note his Hegelian dialectic approach to dialogue. I don't find it very helpful and productive. Let me give you an example. With the Synod of Bishops, we've seen this before, and this is another example. He invites people to the Synod of Bishops, some people who are on one extreme of the spectrum and others who are on the other extreme of the spectrum, and he'll invite these people and he'll have them all come together. So you get these extreme views, and then he kind of comes out and gives something that's a synthesis, something that's kind of in the middle and balanced. And even if that's a good approach as far as the end product, it's not a good way to get there, because there's a lot of confusion that is caused to get to that point, because all these extreme figures who are then brought to the synods are then giving social media interviews, and there's all kinds of confusion coming from them. And so even if, they're saying all kinds of wild things, that people get really concerned. And again, even if the end product at the end of the day turns out to be something well balanced, but we got there through a series of confusing statements made by individuals who participate in these things. So that's another one of my concern, is the way in which he goes about dialogue. So let's see. Let me go to another one here. I do think that he could offer more catechesis on some things that are misunderstood, kind of related to what we saw earlier. If you're going to be in some kind of event that could be open to misinterpretation, if you're going to go through with the event, offer some pretty heavy explanations and catechesis prior to it. The perfect example is the Pachamama issue. If he had in advance given some pretty strong catechesis and explanation of what's taking place here and explained this is the Virgin Mary, there's veneration of the Virgin Mary here, there's veneration of these other saints and martyrs who are here on this mat, there's, these are Christian prayers that we're using, these are Catholics we're celebrating, not pagans, not shamans, that this is, and if that catechesis was given, so much confusion would have been squelched right then and there. But it wasn't really provided in advance. And then when the criticisms came, it wasn't really clarified very well after that either. Which brings us back to the previous issue of not really responding to a critic when in instances that I think we need a response. Instead, we're allowing a situation to fester. So there's another one. Here's I think this is the 9th one. I guess I only have 10. So he wants to discuss strategies, in my opinion, that are not always best at this given time. Let me give an example. Let's say, well, we have people who are pushing for women's ordination, right? You certainly have people who are pushing for women's ordination, to the priesthood and all that, even to the episcopate. And then you also have others that are wanting to discuss female deacons. Now, I understand we have female deacons in Scripture. I understand we've had it historically pretty late in the Western Church, and even in some instances in the Eastern churches, you still have it into today. I understand there's also a debate on the nature of them. Is it sacramental? Is it not? I get it. There's a whole lot of discussion there. My problem is he will sometimes entertain discussions on those topics in an environment that is pushing for things that cannot take place. So according to Ordinatio Sacerdotalis, it's definitively the case that women cannot be ordained to the presbyterate or the episcopate. That's definitive. But there's still people pushing for it. There's even people who are going to the synod who are pushing for that. And yet we still are tolerating discussions about some of these things, or tolerating discussions about maybe women's ordination to the diaconate. Is it really the best time to maybe even have discussions about women's ordination to the diaconate? Now, I don't know to what extent that's actually going to take place. There's just talk about it, but I don't know to what extent it's going to happen. But if it's tolerated, is this really the best environment to tolerate that discussion in, when you already have people who are pushing for women's ordination to the priesthood, which we know is excluded? And then again, why even entertain talk of those who are saying, hey, we're going to bring this up at the synod? Why even tolerate that? It's already a closed discussion. The same-sex blessing issue, why even tolerate a discussion on it? It's already a closed discussion. But there's people who are saying, well, no, we're going to bring this up and we want to talk about it. It's already a closed matter. Why continue to revive these things? And why is he allowing people to do that whenever it's going against what he himself has said? It just doesn't seem like a strong point of leadership there. And then lastly, though certainly not last in importance, but last on the list, I think he's way too active with off-the-cuff responses. I feel that when Pope Francis was first made the Pope, and when he saw how quickly they ripped him out of context with the words, who am I to judge? And yeah, they did rip him out of context really badly there. And, some of us know that now, but there's still a lot of people who to this day, 10 years later, are really confused over that. When he saw that, how confused people were, because he surely saw some of it, and how much they took him out of context, because he sure saw some of that, I think he should have learned right then and there, I need to be very hesitant to offer these interviews and off-the-cuff responses, especially on the hot button topics. I need to be very guarded. And instead, what I should do is, if I feel it's important to speak on these things, let me write a statement in advance and let me run it through a filter. Let me make sure some guys from the DDF double check this thing, make sure I got my ducks in a row and I'm not saying something wacky here before I make the statement. Let me be a little bit more careful and guarded with what I say so as to help cut down on the confusion. Because part of the confusion is, yes, it's misreporting. Yes, it's media. Yes, it's people on social media misrepresenting him. Yes, it's people circulating lies. Yes, it's all that. Yes, it's people looking for something to twist. It's all of that. But that's only half of the problem. The other half of the problem is, but Pope Francis also could be more clear in other instances. And he could also follow up and clarify some things that are confused and could be more guarded in those instances so as to cut down on the confusion. Will it eliminate it? No. You'll always have people who are of bad will who are going to try to twist Pope Francis. You'll always have that. But you can cut down on the confusion by not adding more fuel to the fire by being confusing yourself. Because in some cases, it's not just social media, it's him. The problem is him, ultimately, in some of these instances. In other instances, the problem's not him, it's people who are not of goodwill. Okay, so those are my criticisms. Now let's maybe talk about some of the good things that I've seen from this pontificate. He put in the canon law, automatic excommunications for people who attempt to ordain women. It's pretty important. Automatic excommunication for women's ordination. Let me see if I can find it real quick here. I should have had it pulled up. If I could pull up the canon, that'd be helpful. 2021 revision of church law, canon 1379, explicitly criminalized conferring sacred orders on women automatically. So automatic excommunication. Canon 1379 in 2021. That's a pretty big deal. Now, notice that he's still tolerating, in some instances, talk of women's ordination, and yet he himself has promulgated automatic excommunication for people who do this. So it's like you're giving people too much leeway in some cases with these discussions. Number two, in 2021, he gave a very emphatic no to same-sex blessings, and it is magisterial. I thought that was such a great thing, such a strong move. It needed to happen. But then, the other flip side to that is, but then he still kind of allows talk on it, whenever it's contrary to what he's already decided, he still gives people too much leeway, But ultimately, on the books, they're magisterially, officially no to this. And that's it. That is important. And we don't want to take away from that. Also, number three, I think that he's strong on emphasis on mercy to the sinner and those who are in the margins. I think that's good. Those people who are marginalized in society, reaching out to them, that's certainly what Jesus did. An emphasis on mercy to the sinner, that's certainly what Jesus did. Now, Jesus said, go and sin no more, but he's obviously very, very merciful. And so I think we see that in Pope Francis, and I appreciate that about him. Another thing that I loved about Pope Francis is he says abortion is like hiring a hitman. I mean, spot on. Absolutely. I can't get enough of that. More on that, please, Pope Francis. And he said it multiple times. So very unqualified comments there on abortion that I appreciate. Another thing for us Eastern Catholics is that he opened up marriage for Eastern Catholic priests in the United States. Now, it's actually the other way around. Married men can be ordained to the presbyterate in the Eastern Catholic Church. No priest can actually get married. It's that, married men can become priests in the United States. Now, Eastern Catholics have always preserved the tradition of a married presbyterate or being celibate. Like, you have an option. You could do either. We've always preserved that tradition, but in the United States, where that was that's a sensitive topic due to the fact that the majority here in the United States, the majority of Catholics are Latin Rite Christians, whereas it was allowed for Eastern Catholics in other countries It's like, okay, but when you come to a Latin Rite country, you gotta put that on hold. And then it's like, but wait, that's not consistent even with Vatican II, because Vatican II says we have to preserve our own traditions and disciplines. So Pope Francis, heeding Vatican II, that the Eastern churches need to preserve their own traditions and not become Latinized. They need to preserve their own customs. He certainly opened that up, and I appreciate that about Pope Francis. Um, he's also very active in promoting dialogue with the Eastern Orthodox. I think that's great because we need to grow closer to the Orthodox. We need more allies, and they're the closest to us. So we need to do everything we can to work towards communion. So I appreciate that. Another thing that I actually thought was a good move is that he granted the SSPX faculties to hear confessions. Prior to him granting those faculties, the people who would go to the SSPX priests for confessions, their sins were not absolved. Even though the priest would say they're absolved, they were actually, in fact, not absolved. And so, what Pope Francis did is he went ahead and healed that issue right then and there so that they have those faculties. Now, he's not endorsing what they're doing. This is for the sinner. This is a mercy for the sinner. And this is certainly a good gesture towards the SSPX, but it's certainly not condoning the SSPX and what they're doing, but rather for the sake of all those people who are going to confession and not receiving a valid absolution, to be merciful to those people, he granted the faculties. And I think that was the right move. I do think that was a good move. He has spoken of the ideological colonization of those who are promoting contraceptives, abortion, sterilization, and even gender ideology. I thought that's pretty strong statement. I appreciate that. Number 9, he has explicitly noted, if we are in sin, grave sin, then we must go to confession first before receiving the Eucharist. He says, quote, "We know that one who has committed a serious sin should not approach Holy Communion without having first obtained absolution in the sacrament of reconciliation," end quote. That's Pope Francis. So Pope Francis is saying, if you're in grave sin, like if you're in mortal sin, do not approach Holy Communion. Go to confession first. We need more of that. We need way more of that. He's also strong in evangelism and Evangelii Gaudium. I mean, just read that. It's incredible. He's very strong on the need for us to evangelize souls and bring them into the kingdom of Jesus Christ. And then number 11, related to that, an emphasis on salvation in Jesus alone. You can see this in multiple homilies of Pope Francis, and also even in Evangelii Gaudium, among other places. And also World Youth Day in Brazil. Very strong on salvation in Jesus alone, no other religion. You can't be saved anywhere else. It's in Jesus alone. And I appreciate that. We need to hear more of that message. That's a message that is being obscured by many people. So is the need to evangelize. That's being obscured by many people. We need to hear more of what he said in Evangelii Gaudium about that. And also, again, there's some people who are obscuring the need to go to confession before receiving the Eucharist if you're in grave sin. There's people obscuring that. Pope Francis is saying, nope, you need to go to confession first. We need that more. We need a stronger presentation of that. So while I think those are good things of Pope Francis, I think he could do them stronger and better. I think that he could do a better job at them. They're good. Could we do them more? Yes. And also, is he allowing other things in some of the areas that I presented with the bad section? Is he allowing some things to take place there that is undermining some of the good things that he does? Yes. Yes, he is. And that ultimately undermines his own message. It's not helpful. And so I'm not sure that's the best approach. And so hopefully this has been helpful to kind of give you a more balanced take on Pope Francis, because I see people on both ends of the spectrum. Some people just think it's the best pontificate ever. Others think is the worst pontificate ever. And I just want to say there is a middle position here. There's some bad things. There's some good things. I think we need to recognize both the good and the bad and kind of keep a more balanced perspective. But those are my thoughts. Hopefully that was helpful. If it was, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Check me out also at patreon.com/reason in theology if you want to support the show and the channel here and what I'm doing. Also check out the donate link that I have there in the show notes, or the GoFundMe link that I'm going to put in the show notes if y'all want to support what I'm doing through either one of those avenues. Certainly check them out. All right, that's going to do it, y'all. We'll see you later. God bless. Hey, pro-lifers, I want to remind you about realestateforlife.org. If you want to support the pro-life movement at no cost to you in the process of buying a home or selling a home, office, or any kind of property anywhere in the world, check out realestateforlife.org for more information. God bless. Hey, everybody, just wanted to tell you about my new free ebook, Church Chaos, Biblical Insights for Confused Catholics. If you are a confused Catholic and you're thinking about leaving the Catholic Church, or you're thinking about converting to the church, but you see that there's a crisis in the church and you're just unsure, this is the book for you. Again, it is free. Just simply go to reasonandtheology.com. You'll see a pop-up that comes up on your screen. Just simply click on it and you'll put in your email and it will provide you the free PDF ebook right then and there. Please check it out if you're confused about the situation in the Catholic Church today. reasonandtheology.com. So Reason in Theology is growing as a channel. As a result, there's been a number of increases in production costs. So if you're benefiting from RNT, I ask that you consider supporting the channel. You can help out by contributing to the Help RNT Grow fundraiser on GoFundMe. You could also consider becoming a member on Patreon at patreon.com/reason in theology, or become a channel member right here on YouTube. With either of these options, Patreon or a YouTube member, you'll get extra access to patron-only content. You can also donate directly to RNT at PayPal if you prefer that option. And you can find links to all of these resources and ways to support RNT in the show description. God bless. Hey, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button and the subscribe button. See you next time. God bless.